specifically in the slum areas. Again, when the slum census was released, it said that of the statutory towns, 2000 and only 2,543 had slums, which is about half the statutory towns were considered not to have slums. Again, by a definition, very, very narrow definition of what is considered to be a slum. A third big question, and this relates to one of your major contributions, is related to this decentralized water provision as well as wastewater treatment. And I accept the point that you're making about the energy intensity that comes from large centralized systems. And of course, the kind of work I do on climate change, it has a significant impact on that front as well. But here's the point, and the Honorable Minister mentioned this at several points during his presentation, that what is the economic case? Now, when we look at a range of decentralized energy systems, whether it's in water, it's in energy, or in sanitation, there are three big questions that any so-called entrepreneur has to grapple with. Number one, is there, and those three questions are different from when you build a larger centralized system. Number one, what is my predictable revenue source? Now, when you build a larger system, you are signing a contract with, say, the water utility, or in the energy space with the electricity board and so forth. So that becomes your long-term agreement. When you're doing decentralized systems, you don't necessarily know whether next month's revenue will be the same as the last month's, or the next year's will be significantly less or more. A second big question is, because by definition they're smaller and decentralized, for investors and bankers and financiers, the risk becomes larger on average, because you're concentrating more risk across a large number of small projects. So is there a way of aggregating the risk and normalizing that curve across a large number of smaller decentralized systems? And the third, and this applies again to a large extent on water but also to energy, is this assumption that a lot of this is capital cost. But when you begin to examine decentralized systems, there's, in addition to the capital cost, there's a huge amount of working capital requirement. And do we have the financial mechanisms in place that would provide that working capital for these operators so that they can deliver services of quality? So it is simply to add on a bunch of more intricate issues that we have to work through if we have to move towards this area. A fourth big question relates to this point that you have raised, Dr. Shah, about the water demand from industry and the power sector. Now, here is the challenge. While our work, which contributed to your efforts in developing the 12th Five-Year Plan, identified a range of technologies in industry, I fear that unfortunately, while we are focused significantly on industry, we are not focused on the big beast within industry, which is the power sector, in terms of technological innovation. So even if every iron and steel mill and cement factory and textile mill puts forward its water footprint in its annual reports, 95%, it is estimated 95% of additional water withdrawals in the country will come simply from the power sector. And you mentioned once through cooling, but it's not just thermal power, and that's the challenge. Even as on one side we try to get into a more sustainable energy source, say through solar, we've mapped the development of concentrated solar power plants in India, which are very efficient, help the grid stability, etc. But they're all located right along the Indira Gandhi Canal in the state of Rajasthan, where, as you very well know, the groundwater situation is extremely poor. But concentrated solar power plants take per megawatt of energy produced the same amount of water as a thermal power plant. So we need to expand our notion of where innovation needs to happen within that industrial sector beyond just the reporting. And I think some kind of targeted effort, and whether, similar to what the energy patch scheme, the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme on energy has been introduced, whether we should be discussing something along those lines for water efficiency in industry and the power sector is worthwhile to consider. The final two questions relate to your very neat framework of 6x4, and which is that what are the if you could reflect on what are the types of institutions that would be valid in each of those cells. Now, I don't expect you to give me 24 sets of institutions, But what is what is interesting in your paper is that water systems are dynamic and they're changing. So by definition, actually the city that falls into one box today will have moved to another box in, say, 5 to 10 years from now, right? Even though it's within the same hydrogeological system. So what do we need to do to gear the institutional mechanisms that would evolve as rapidly? And there comes the role, whether it's the role of a water utility or even a water regulator, on which I did not find as much emphasis in your paper as on the other issues. And I think this is where, and I'll conclude with this point, your effort in guiding us towards this participatory management is extremely important. As we speak, some of my team members are working in Meerut district. Meerut district has about 3.5 million people, but the town is much smaller. But just as you're describing, it's expanding, and it's expanding into these peri-urban and rural areas. The rural areas are drawing on these traditional water bodies. But if they're not mapped correctly, that's where you'll likely get a shopping mall in 5 years. So we are trying to map about 1,000 traditional water bodies, and then if we can make this into something that can be done quickly and scaled up, this is where the local population can get involved. It's minimal training to get them to go do the GIS mapping or do the water sampling collection, and they get a feeling that they are contributing to not just their immediate water security, but the sustainability of their water security as they continue to aspire to become urban residents and not simply rural residents. So let me stop there. I think I have exhausted my 10 to 12 minutes. But once again, huge thanks for this paper, and thanks to you, Dr. Ahluwalia, for letting me comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arunabha. These are very substantive comments, and I'm sure, Mihir, you want to respond to some of them. But shall we take about 5 questions from the floor? And then I think
a quick response is merited. These are
before we get on to maybe other people are doing some elaboration of.
I know, but I thought.
All right, we'll go by your judgment. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. No, Arunabha, that was so excellent. I must thank you for the care with which you have read the paper, and actually you are making me see it in a very different light as well. So that's really what a discussant should ideally be doing, and thank you for that. I think your key points, again, I'm not going to respond to everything you said, also in the interest of time, but I think it's very important. This question keeps coming about the decentralized, even the previous workshop we had on this paper, this was a major question that came up, that how can you make the case in economic terms. So there are 2 points you're making. One is in terms of the investor and the banker risk, etc. So who are you going to be signing the agreement with? And I think the one way forward, which I don't think is elaborated sufficiently in the paper, but thanks to your intervention, I think that needs much more substantiation, is that you can have a network. That is the way cities have to go finally. You cannot say that you'll have one developer, or you cannot say that you will have a million, ways of dealing with the problem. I think there can be networks. I think the minister probably alluded to that briefly. You have areas delineated, and which could be done based on each specific location. And you have those networks coming up, which could then be covering many of these decentralized units, but you have one, sort of semi-centralized, if you like, or whatever. The ideal way of describing it actually is polycentric. So we need to move towards polycentric cities where there are many centers, and these are being dealt with by a nodal agency in each case, in each center. On your revenue, the whole working capital issue, I think there you would acknowledge, from the example later you mentioned about Meerut, and I'll come back to Meerut again, is that if you are to make the viable economic model happen on working capital, it needs people to pay for the services. That's what Dr. Ahluwalia has been emphasizing, and that can, I think, only happen if you have a decentralized system. If you're going to have these large mega, providers who are going to try and hassle with local people, there's already a huge reaction against PPP projects on this ground. But if you have more decentralized systems, and there are people who have greater intimate connection with the ground, then I think the willingness to pay can be generated by making people as feel a sense of ownership about the systems that are being organized. At least all the systems I have worked with in my lifetime, each of which are based on, by the way, payments by users, none of them are purely subsidy driven, are based on payments because, especially because they are led by women, let me add, which I should emphasize, and they are understanding a sense of ownership over the systems and then expressing a willingness to pay, because it's not somebody else telling them. And so the regulator question that you're asking, this is really the answer, because if you have a top-down regulator in a system as complex as water, you're going to have a problem. We need a more participatory system where people actually affix tariffs on their own. And that is the way the system can work, and that's why decentralized systems are, that's another reason I should mention more prominently, I think, in the paper, why they would tend to work better. And finally, I would like to therefore address the question of institutions that you said, because actually this is linked to that answer. That the, as you said, in the matrix, cities and towns will evolve, along the row, let's say, of the matrix. But what would happen is if you have built these institutions from day one, that is the exciting possibilities I see in urban India. While we see a lot of dismal, dark sort of situation, the fact that we have so many towns and cities which have not, the damage has not yet been done, where institutions and decentralized systems can actually be set up, where ULBs can be strengthened, we get the foundation for the transition. Because unless you set up those institutions, you're not going to be able to transition at all. I mean, it's going to be just a problem getting deeper and deeper. But if you have invested in capacities and building those institutional capacities and systems, then I think the transitions will happen much easier.
Thank you, Mihir. May I now open this for discussion to the floor? Would you introduce yourself and be brief?
I'm G.K. Bhatt from Toru. I fully endorse the last part of the discussion, which were the things you said about the polycentric city. I think you should read Kent Larson's work on cellular city. It's a very fantastic MIT work, which is really, really useful. I think, those ideas, if we can take water within 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer, is what we should aim at, not at the 25 kilometers or 500 kilometers away.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yes. Acha, aap lijiye.
My name is Nitin Pandit from WRI in India. Excellent presentations and questions so far on urban water systems. I guess I just have one question. You spoke a little bit about drainage. I haven't read your paper thoroughly, as much as Arunabha has, I'm sure. And I really appreciate that, because otherwise I think we're looking at urban water systems, but primarily from the supply side. And I think bringing drainage into the mix also brings in issues on the demand side. So just a question on your opinion. What is the responsibility of an urban water system when it comes to drainage and what happens downstream? And should those full costs be incurred at the urban level, because those are otherwise passed on to the people downstream? Thank you.
Yes, please.
I'm R.K. Garg. I'm a former member Technical Delhi Jal Board. My issue is basically, as you have described in your paper, the growth of the urban centers. I say why this growth has been permitted at all. Why we couldn't introduce the urban planning from the day one. When we could take up growth, development of Chandigarh, right in 1950, why then we forgot to plan other cities? And can any urban water supply utility function efficiently in absence of efficient urban planning? It is my own experience in Delhi Jal Board that there are huge losses because Delhi has grown in an unplanned manner. Even quality of supply.
I think
is
you've made
seriously
your
compromised.
point, please. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Yes.
another second issue I want to say, in the solution, we should focus on the river valley storages also.
Yes, please.
I am KRG Naya. I used to teach business economics in Delhi University. First of all,